tell you a bit about Simon. So everything that he does is built to energize people to see the world in a different way. He wants to awaken people's imagination so they can see what is truly possible and for them to live a better story. He's an award-winning coach and motivational speaker, and he has been invited to speak. Well, he spoke on Sky News, BBC, Forbes, and has already spoken to some of the planet's most successful organizations such as Virgin, Salesforce, and Microsoft. His debut book, Energize, will be published on the 21st of April and is now available for pre-order at getenergizedbook.com. Welcome, Simon.
Roxy, thank you so much for having me here, and I'm looking forward to this session together. Fantastic,
fantastic. I've seen that you've been keeping yourself very busy with the pre-launch of your book. I've already ordered it as well. I can't wait to read everything about energy and mindset at the same time.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Roxy, for the support. And you know, this is my debut book, so a lot of this is new for me as well. It's exciting, and you know, I can't wait to share some of my work with the world.
Fantastic. And I remember you started the work like 2 years ago to start to write the book.
Yeah, it's crazy how quick time has gone. It was just over 2 years ago I had the first conversations with Penguin, and it was July, August 2020 that I first started to write the very first draft. And so from there to now, it has been a roller coaster of a journey.
How did you decide what to write about?
Sure. So when we had the conversation with Penguin initially, there were a few ideas that I put forward for discussion. And one of them, and this is a bit of behind the scenes actually, because the original title of the book, when it was put in the proposal, was actually Energy is Everything. And as I started to write and we edited the manuscript, over time that title reduced to one word, which you see now as Energize. And the reason that I wanted to talk about the work that I do through that angle is a couple of reasons. The first is that when I was in the corporate world, so I used to work in the financial services sector for nearly 10 years. And during my time there, I was burnt out multiple times. I was working long hours, 6 or 7 in the morning into the office, and often not out until 9 or 10 in the evening. And so I was not getting sufficient rest or sleep. I was surviving on junk food and takeaway, and I wasn't finding time to exercise. And so I'd gone through burnout through that process and realized that if I wanted to achieve any goals in life, well, I had to address the fact that I had an energy deficit. So how could I start bringing back energy and focus on what mattered most? So that was one of the reasons. The second is that when I would go on to speak on stages at some of the companies that you mentioned in the introduction and conferences that I've been privileged to speak at, I would often get people come up to me after I finished my talk, when I come down from the audience, asking me, Simon, I really enjoyed your energy on stage. And you know what, if I could have just a small percentage of that energy, I think I could go on and achieve so much more in my own life. And so that was the second reason. And the third is that when I started to study some of the most successful organizations, teams, and leaders, what I noticed is very often they succeeded not because they were the fastest or the most intelligent, but because they were able to manage their energy in a very efficient way. They understood that if we are exhausted, we can't have the capacity to focus and follow through on the things that we would like to do.
Absolutely. And I remember from, I think it was 8 years ago that you came and you spoke for the volunteering organization JCI. Like the energy that you came with on the stage, like really left a mark. Like years after, that was the reason that really that drove me to follow you on Facebook and to see you grow in the successful entrepreneur. So indeed, like now that you told us about the behind the scenes, I can track it back in time as well. I can say, yeah, indeed, like you had that energy to begin with. So it wasn't something that you fabricated. Maybe you've managed to grow it over the years, but that was definitely there to begin with as well. Okay. Definitely. So you're gonna see me look on my left. This is
Mhm.
where I have the screen with the live questions that are gonna start coming in from people.
Perfect.
So I'm obviously paying attention. And then I also have a set of questions, particularly from the people that are in the Mindset Masterminds
Mm.
that want to address it directly to you. So I'll suggest for us to dive straight in the questions and then keep this as a conversation. And everyone watching online, we welcome your questions as well as you get inspired. Okay. So one of the first questions is how do we need to start the day in order to make sure that we can make the most of it?
Sure. Well, first of all, with regards to how we start the day, for me is you want to start the day with your most important task first. And the only way you can do so is by planning your day the night before. So what actually happens is that many of us begin the day not knowing what our most important tasks are. So just as we experience our highest level of energy in the morning when we wake up and the day begins, we actually waste a lot of that energy simply thinking about what are we going to do today. And so we lose all of the energy in the beginning that by the time we actually start work on our most important tasks, we've already expended a lot of energy. So for me, one of the most important things we can do is the night before, start to plan your day ahead. So tonight, for example, if you're looking at tomorrow, ask yourself, how will I know that tomorrow will have been a productive day? Begin with the end in mind, if you will. So there may be two or three things that come to your thinking as you do this exercise. Now write those two or three things down so that when you begin the next day, you have focus in terms of using that energy first thing in the morning. Now, for me, what I do is I also understand that first thing in the morning, my motivation is at its highest. So I want to do the things that are good for my energy. So what I mean by this is I begin each day with some form of exercise. So
Yeah.
whether that's swimming, going to a boot camp, doing weight training, whatever it may be, something that gets my blood pumping and puts me in a very powerful state of mind. And then I get straight into my activities. And then once I've done that, whatever happens for the rest of the day, because sometimes we can't predict what is going to come up in our day, but whatever happens for the rest of the day, I already feel productive because I've already ticked off the most important items on that list.
Fantastic. That's really good. So you're basically saying get your blood pumping first,
Hmm.
and then dive into the important task of the day that you potentially already scheduled from the day before.
Exactly, because then there's nothing on your mind to worry about. You know exactly where your energy should be focused on. And because you've elevated the state of your thinking as a result of moving your body, getting some exercise, you're far more likely to focus and find your flow quicker when you're operating from that state of mind.
Yeah. And how does that work with spontaneity if we
Sure.
plan a day ahead?
Yeah, so for me, Roxy, this is where I think the bookends are so important. So while we can't always plan or know what to expect each day, I think at the minimum, we can plan our mornings and evenings. How do we begin the day? How do we end the day? Now, if we can be consistent in those, I think that is a great first step because during the day, of course, there are going to be things that are going to happen or you want to create space for spontaneity.
Yeah.
But at least on the bookends of the day, at least that is in your control to manage. So I think once you manage that, then at least during the day, you are open to those spontaneity, to things happening for you throughout the day, whether that is an unexpected conversation, an unexpected opportunity, or an event that comes up that you didn't plan for.
Okay, super. And I'm coming back to something they said in the introduction, where we were saying we're close to burnout. So, I mean, I don't want to say that it's. I've seen the movie, the documentary, The Minimalist, where they actually follow people around working in the banking industry, and they talk about basically spending a lot of time indoor and not fulfilling their life, their life's purpose. And it also gets me thinking in terms of the type of energy that we need for different tasks. So you can be busy and at the end of the day still have a bit of time, still have a bit of energy, and you can be busy and at the end of the day be completely exhausted. And you were describing probably the latter in your earlier example. How would you classify like the different types of energy? So like I gave like these two examples in terms of like the ones that.
So for me, just to illustrate why I was burnt out at the time I was in my corporate career. So when I talk about the fact that I was burnt out, I'm referring to energy from different perspectives. Physically, I was burnt out. Mentally, I was burnt out. Emotionally, I was burnt out because I was just full of anger, frustration, angry at the fact that why did I start in this industry a year before the financial crisis? If only I started a few years before, then I would have had some money. I would have built a career in this industry. I was frustrated about the lack of opportunities and the fact that I didn't get that promotion, or this wasn't a path that I had imagined. When people said, get a job in banking and that will make you successful, they didn't take into the fact that we had a recession coming and all of the impact and consequences that came with it. And then I was also spiritually exhausted in the sense that I was doing something that was not aligned to who I was. And I was only doing it because I grew up believing that success was defined by my job title. Be a banker, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an accountant. And so I was exhausted spiritually because I wasn't doing something that made me feel alive, that brought me joy. And I was measuring my progress against metrics determined by other people. So in a way, I was spiritually exhausted. I was going against my natural grain. I had all these ideas and imagination of things that I wanted to do, yet I was doing the complete opposite. I was pursuing a path that just didn't bring me fulfillment. And it taught me in that moment that there is a huge difference between success and fulfillment. You can look successful, but you won't feel fulfilled because you're not doing something that brings the best out of you.
Fantastic answer. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to go on to the next question that we have prepared for you, and I have quite a few that are my favorite already. So, how do you take quantum leaps to scale your startup business?
Sure. So, for me, understanding what a quantum leap is basically the ability to move faster than the majority in terms of your progress. And now, in order to make those quantum leaps, there's a couple of things that go into that. The very first ingredient, if you will, is your energetic field, otherwise known as your environment. So who is in your environment? Now, for me, when I was in finance, I was spending my time during the day with people in finance. I would go drinking with people in finance after work. I would spend my weekends socializing with people in finance. And so for me, that wasn't an environment conducive to who I wanted to be. And so I had to shift the energy of the environment I was in. And so what I started to do was surround myself with coaches and mentors and leaders and entrepreneurs who were further ahead than me, people that would make me look like the dumbest person in the room. But here's the thing. When you feel like you're the dumbest person in the room, you are at a massive advantage because you suddenly become this sponge, soaking up all of this inspiration, this knowledge, and these insights that you can go and apply immediately. And the part of this experience which helps you to make quantum leaps is that the habits that these individuals have that have made them who they are suddenly become your normal. Because for them, the habits that you aspire to have or embrace, for them, it's their normal. So suddenly waking up early becomes your normal. Getting daily exercise becomes your normal. Reading every day becomes your normal. Putting action as your main focus each day becomes normal. And that's how you begin to make quantum leaps. The second for me is relationships. You know, how are you going about nurturing, cultivating, and expanding your network? Because what you'll realize, especially if you are building a startup, if you're growing a business, if you're developing your career, is that a lot of your progress will be determined by who you know and the quality of those relationships. So if you can make that a habit of continue growth of your relationship circles, of your networks, then before long, you'll start to see opportunities that you were previously blind to. People will start referring you, introducing you to someone that can benefit from what you do, or an event that needs your expertise. And that's how you begin to make those quantum leaps. Because when you're applying for a job in an industry, or you're looking for an investor, what you'll very quickly discover is that a lot of the greatest opportunities are not advertised. The greatest opportunities are not advertised. They come through connections and relationships. And that's why if you focus on building that as part of your personal growth, then you are able to make those quantum leaps. And the third for me, so the first was environment, upgrading the energy of your field. Second is relationships. And third for me is your ability to assimilate, codify, and apply information at speed. That is what's going to help you make quantum leaps. So here's what I mean. Assimilating information is your ability to source what you need to know in a very fast way. So for example, that could come in the form of reading, watching a YouTube video, attending a seminar, working with a mentor, a coach, a mastermind group, whatever that medium is. So that's how you assimilate information. They're your inputs in terms of your learning. Now, the next stage is what I call codify. How are you then with that information codifying what you need to know? Because what you need to know might be different to what I need to know. So to give an example of how I codify is when most people go and hear a speaker present, they are going to listen for the content. What are they going to talk about? What notes can I take about the new model or the new strategy they're going to share? For me, however, I don't go for the content, because in many cases, I already know what they're talking about because I've read their book, I've already watched their videos. So when I go and hear them speak in person, I'm actually looking to codify how they do what they do. So what I mean by this is, while most focus on the content, I'm asking myself, how did they begin that talk? How did they end the talk? How many stories did they use? At what point did they pause? When did they walk into the audience? When did they engage with the audience? So I'm trying to codify the behavior rather than the content. And so that's how we learn very quick, is we're looking at the structures of how people do things. And the third is apply. You know, knowledge is great, knowledge is power, as they say, but the real magic comes in the application.
Always growing, Simon, always growing. Even at this level, like you're going in there and you're codifying, like how can you get to the next level? Amazing. And I was smiling as you were saying that, because a confession to the people watching us, I was in Simon's mastermind 2 years ago, something like that. Simon, you're on mute.
Yeah, it'll be about 1.5 years, 2 years ago.
Okay. And I think I was for about 2 years. So we started 4 years ago, and we stopped 2 years ago. We started 4 years ago and stopped 2 years ago. And I remember that I was the only one in the group not having a business. And like having you guys listen to you guys having these conversations about like, how can you think about this, and how can you be more daring, and how can you go and talk to clients, was something like very foreign to me. But like your way of delivering the message was always like very engaging. And there was something about me getting familiar with this type of content and this type of conversations that over the years gave me the courage to actually go and do something that I haven't done before, because I've seen already a group of people that have done this. Like my group of friends were like back in London, like everyone is full-time employed. At that point, nobody around me had their own business. So for me to go and have a business was like, whoa, I could never do that. So the difference that it made, just being in a mastermind with like-minded people, well, you were all like-minded people. I was just there aspiring, as you were saying, the dumbest one in the room when it comes to this subject. It was fantastic. Like it changed the course of my career. So when I got to the point of thinking of starting my business, I knew that it's possible because I've heard you guys have these conversations. And I double smile when I hear your examples about waking up early in the morning. Because the first time that you said that, I was thinking, oh my God, I could never wake up early in the morning. I don't know what this is. And now, in whichever house I sleep, whether I'm in London or I'm back in Romania, I'm the first one that wakes up in the house. And actually, the people around me start to wake up earlier because of my habit as well. But this was something that came from you as well. So it was an inspiration for it. So yeah, indeed. The people that we surround ourselves with, so like the environment that we create around us, can make such a difference. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be like the next day. It could be in 2 years' time. But like you have to start now making like those small changes if you want to see a difference in some time. And everyone goes on at their own speed with this.
Definitely.
Okay. I'm jumping around with the topics because I think it's more interesting this way. You posted even like today something about pronoia. So I would love for you to, first of all, like give us the definition of what pronoia is, and then tell us how can we be more pronoia.
Sure. Well, many people don't know the word, but I think it's a great word to know. Now, just to give it some context, paranoia is the feeling that the world is out to get you, that you are a victim, that people are conspiring for your downfall. So people often talk about it in politics or in the office environment. We're paranoid that he or she is about to take our job. They're going to take our promotion. They're out to get us in some way. They're thinking bad or ill towards us. Pronoia is the complete opposite. Pronoia is the belief that the world is conspiring in your favor, that life is working for you and not against you. And here's how we can be more pronoia. The first step is simply realizing that our experience of the world is simply the result of living in the feeling of our thinking moment to moment to moment. Now, what this is telling us is that there is no one reality. There is only our customized realities. So the way you interpret an event or experience will, of course, be very different to the way I do, different to your friend, different to your colleague or your partner. But that also tells us that we have this ability that very few other beings have, which is the power to choose one thought over another at any given moment. Literally, when an event occurs, you can decide what that event means to you. And by choosing a meaning, or in some cases, a different meaning, you literally reshape and resculpt your reality. Because if you see an event to be good, then the action or behavior you take as a result will be very different than if you saw that event to be bad. And so in a way, once we start to embrace pronoia, we are operating from that lens that life is always working for us. And that belief changes the colors by which we see the world through.
That's fantastic. And I want to give an example from our live mastermind that we had last week. So we're a group of people that we come together to support each other, and it's under the umbrella Mindset Matters. So the way that we look at the world matters, basically. And there was an example, and I hope she's not going to mind me sharing this as well. I'm not giving names anyway. But she was saying that when she was back in employment, she was discriminated for the fact that she was a woman, and maybe because she was a bit shorter. So like she kept like this thought with her for years, because this happened like a few years ago. And it was very interesting when we spoke in the group. Somebody like picked up on this, and he was saying, "Didn't you say that you were like the youngest one there?" Basically, that could also imply that you were the newest one in the team, so like you had like the least experience. And very quickly, it did transpire that it had nothing to do with the story that she was telling herself, that like this is what happened and this is why people are treating me this way. It was basically she was junior compared to other people, so she wasn't getting the same level of task compared to others. And all of a sudden, the way that she felt about the whole situation massively changed. So like the same event, the same person, just a different perspective on that made a very big difference.
Definitely. And I think when it sort of brings to mind, Roxy, the feeling of stress, you know, at its core, nothing really is stressful. It's only our thinking that makes it so. So when an event occurs, pardon me, it's our thinking about what that event means for us that creates that level of stress.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it makes me think, just like listening to your answer, because there's some people that get to say, "Oh, it's all right for you to say that because you don't have a stressful life. You get to choose what you do." Like I was born in a maybe not a privileged family, or I don't know what type of fill in the blanks on the excuses. What do you have to say for those people that basically say it's all right for you to say, like, be careful, don't be stressed, but like I don't have that choice?
Sure. Well, I think deep down, you always have a choice. We always have a choice. Even not choosing is a choice.
Mm.
Even deciding to remain where you are is also a choice. And every day you are making choices, whether you consciously know it or not. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do you like the choices you are making? Do you like the choices you are making? Now, I haven't come from a particularly privileged background in the sense that my parents were very poor. My dad came from Malaysia to the UK as an immigrant. And it was a single way trip because his parents, my grandparents, they couldn't afford much. They couldn't afford for his education or for him to come back if he decided that it wasn't for him. They could just afford for him to get here. And he had to then decide what his choices would be after that. So he ended up staying in a home of a family. He didn't pay rent because he was able to negotiate that if he didn't pay rent, then he would basically be the housekeeper. He would clean the house, he would look after the child, he would basically do anything a maid would do in a house in exchange for rent, in exchange for the ability to sleep there. And so from his story, I learned the importance of hard work. And that's what I wanted to do as a child growing up. But I also realized that if I wanted to create a life that I would be proud of, but also to take advantage of the fact that we only have this one chance of making the most of this gift of life, I had to make better choices. And better choices come the moment you realize that we only have one shot at this. You know, I think we often forget that we only have one life. There is an Aristotle quote that says, we have two lives, and the second one begins the moment you realize you only have one. And for me, that came very harshly. That lesson came very harshly when I was 17 years old and lost my mum to a tragic accident. And so something like that, a personal tragedy like that, really shifts the way that you see life. Now, instead of complaining that I don't have this or I don't have that, I realized that it was far more productive for me to channel my energy into the things I did have.
Yeah.
What do you have? Because if you step back for a minute, you will realize that you have a lot more than many other people in this world. It is all relative. When you look at somebody ahead of you and you say, oh, it's easy for them to say, it's probably going to be the same for someone who has less than you. They'll be looking at you and saying, well, it's easy for you to say. Life is very much about relative terms. But I think that when you stop and really reflect on what you do have, the relationships you have, the fact that you have a house to live in. I mean, put it this way: the home you live in, regardless of the size of your home, is every homeless person's dream. Reflect on that for a moment. The job that you have, the city that you live in, the resources you have around you. Now, to give an example of how it made me really motivated to focus on what I had, I remember spending some time in Lombok as part of my honeymoon after getting married. And we were taken on a tour around these waterfalls, these beautiful waterfalls on the island. And it was a young boy, couldn't have been more than about 15 or 16 years old, who took us around. And his dream was to live in a different jungle. So we were in his jungle on the island.
Yeah.
His dream was to live in a concrete jungle like New York or London. And I knew, just seeing the difference in life between mine and his, that if he had what I had, if he lived in London, if he had access to the internet in the way I do and the opportunities I had, he would be making the most out of them. And so I think we've got to reshift our energy away from what we don't have and what we do have, because as we do, we come to realize that gratitude is the gateway drug to abundance. Once you start living with gratitude, expressing it with intention, you start to see many things around you that are working in your favor that you were previously blind to.
That's fantastic, and it touched my heart listening to you like say that.
Mm.
There's two questions. I have to decide which one I want to ask first, but um, okay. There's a culture difference between Romania and England. So I feel that in England, for example, when you come up with an idea, may it be a crazy one, saying I want to be a president like next year or something like that, people are going to be like, oh, such an interesting idea, like that's the most that you're going to get. Or maybe people are going to start telling you like, oh, you have to join this club, maybe like, or let me introduce you to this person. So obviously, like depending on the level they're going to give you some of their experience. So they start basically positive, and they
Sure.
start contributing to your idea, so you feel the support. Versus in Romania, it could be because we were a communist country, I don't want to generalize, so I'm not saying that everyone in Romania is this way, but like as a majority, at least the one that I experienced, whenever you come up with an idea, be it a crazy one or a normal one, people are focusing directly on the risks, and they try to protect you. And maybe they're going to think about project their fears on you, like that's dangerous, like how can you do that? So when I work with entrepreneurs in Romania and I push them like to be a bit more bold and all of that, I feel the culture difference. What can you tell my Romanian crowd, the ones that actually want to dream, sorry, they have the dream and they want to put their dream in practice, but they just need to go an extra step to overcome some of the culture programming that we particularly have in this country. I'm sure other countries as well.
Well, I think the major advantage we all have, regardless of culture, regardless of location, is something that previous generations never had. And that is the fact that you can dilute any culture negativity through the fact that you can access things online that previous generations couldn't. You know, you can access a mastermind group of people from various different cities across the world online. You can attend a webinar hosted in America online. You can connect with someone in Australia online. And so I think we have access to resources to help dilute any cultural negativity in a way that we've never had before. And I think second, it's a statement that Sir Ken Robinson said on his TED Talk. And I don't know if you followed Sir Ken Robinson's work, but there's a great statement he talks about when it comes to ambition. And he says that the problem in most parts of society is not that we aim too high and we fail, but it is we aim too low and we succeed. That is the problem. And his challenge basically was to get people to aim higher, because we don't really know how strong we are and what we're capable of unless we aim for something that requires us to be more than who we were yesterday. Now, if we start to aim for low targets, then of course you're going to hit them, but is that really going to bring you out of your comfort zone? Is that really going to show you what you're capable of and require you to become somebody who is better than who they were yesterday? Probably not. And so this is the real benefit of challenging yourself to think bigger, bolder, and braver. It's not always what you get by thinking that way. That is never the real reward. The actual real reward is who you become in the process, who you become in the process of that journey. That is the real reward. And when you start to make progress to be better than who you were yesterday every single day, guess what? You never want to go back to the way things are, because you're now seeing the world through new eyes.
Amazing. And you sparked an idea, which I used to tell, and I keep telling people now, particularly when things go bad, and they say everything is against me, like this is like the worst it has ever been. I'm saying great, rock bottom becomes like a solid foundation to build the rest of your life from. Because I think if you have little to lose, you're probably going to hold on to it like very tightly because you're afraid to lose the little that you have. But when you have nothing to lose, you can just go wild with your ideas. You know what? If I could be whatever I want to be like a marketeer, or I want to be a coach, or something. And then if you make that first step, like in a few months, in a few years, like you are definitely going to make that progress, the one that you were talking about.
Definitely. And yeah, talking about those steps, I think a very powerful first step for all of us to be thinking about is our identity. You know, you shared something earlier, Roxy, about the stories and the words we speak to ourselves. Now, if your identity of yourself isn't particularly great, well, you're not going to embrace the habits required for you to become who you want to be. You know, if I saw myself as somebody who is in a full-time job trying to become a business owner, then of course I'm not going to be doing the things that I need to do in order to become that person that can run a business. But even if I'm in a full-time job and I want to start a business, if from today onwards I see myself as a chief executive officer of my brand, I'm the leader of Simon Inc., I'm the CEO of my company, then suddenly the choices I make tomorrow will be very different. And so you've got to start to see yourself as the CEO of you as a company, and picture yourself as a growth stock. Would people want to invest their money in you? How are they going to get a return on their investment? If they say, okay, I'm going to put X $1,000 into you as a business, will they expect to get a return? So start to see yourself as this brand, as this vehicle or asset, if you will, and see yourself as the leader and CEO of it. The moment you do is the very moment you start embracing the habits required for you to go through that metamorphosis.
We have a comment here from our followers online saying, always compete with your past self. So with the past version of yourself.
Definitely. That is the only person we should be competing with. You know, we can be inspired by other people, for sure, that's great, but don't compare yourself to other people. If you're going to compare, as the comment said, compare only to who you were yesterday. And if you're better than who you were yesterday, you're on the right track.
I wish people could really understand the depth of what you just said. Because I think right now with all the marketing around us, like we're just being flashed, do that, do that, do that. So it's so hard to actually like stop and like go inwards rather than to go outwards, because like they are experts in drawing our attention and make us want different things. But on point, compare only to yourself from from yesterday.
Definitely.
It reminded me of my favorite exercise with you, Simon. So, like during our mastermind, you've introduced us to the be, do, have exercise. And for me, it was such a revelation because obviously, like everyone had like a long list of everything that they want to have. And then, like, who do you want to be and what do you need to do? Like, we weren't that much focused. And then, like, you forced us actually, like, who do you want to be? So like think about it, like if you would be a millionaire, I can't remember now the examples, like how would you behave? Like how would you live your day? Like you can already start doing that. That for me was such a life changer. And even now I bring it into my masterminds. So obviously like we spend a lot of time setting the goals and making sure that they're clear. But then I always come back to this exercise, be, do, have. So who do you need to be? Like in order for you to be able to achieve these things, then let's start today with 1%. Maybe we're not going to be able to do everything at once, and that's okay because I'm going on the same premise. Like it's about the progress that you're making. It's about like becoming a bit better than yesterday.
Definitely. And just to put it in perspective, you know, even if we simplify it to just taking one step a day, a tiny single step each day compounds in a year to 365 steps. I mean, just imagine where you could be 365 steps from now. Who and where could you be? And that's what should motivate us, is to realize that if we just take a single step a day, we could be very different to who we are today. And that should motivate us and pull us forward.
What I typically say to people that come to me to say, motivate me, I don't have any motivation, as if I can do anything about that. Exactly what you're saying. If you do something every day, so if you would watch one video every day, like a motivational one for 10 minutes, if you do it for 3 months, I guarantee you that in 3 months, you're going to feel some sort of inspiration, motivation to do something different. But if you're only going to intake bad information, then it's going to be quite hard for you to fabricate this motivation out of nowhere.
Totally. And this goes back again to our sort of influences and what we're feeding our mind. We're going to be so careful what are we feeding our mind, because what goes in here determines what our output is. And so if we manage and curate what we're feeding our mind, then actually the quality of our output heightens.
How should we curate what we intake?
Again, I think this for me goes back to what your vision is. What is the compelling vision that you're looking to manifest? Now, that will determine what you have to intake. So, for example, my vision is to spread my message and the work that I do to as many people as possible. Now, for me to do that, if I work backwards, then the input that goes in my mind is determined by, well, what am I reading? So I want to read biographies of people who are accomplishing some incredible things in life, who are inspiring, inspirational content. I want to be watching videos that will open my thinking and new perspectives, things such as documentaries, TED Talks, webinars, seminars. I want to be reading magazines about how people are doing what they're doing. Basically anything that equips me with what I need to know in order to make that vision a closer reality. And that's what determines what goes into here. Now, once I know that identity and that vision, the choices become easy. So to give an example, if I see myself as somebody who is healthy and is going to live to 100, then when I go to the supermarket, you're not going to find me with my shopping trolley in the ice cream counter with the frozen food and the microwave meals. You're probably going to find me in the fresh fruit and veg section, in basically the aisles that are actually giving food that is helpful for our energy and our health. And so once we know our identity, what we're working towards, by and large, our choices are already made.
Start with why, right? Like where do you want to get? Which actually brings me to a question. I've seen that Simon Sinek was one of the authors that recommended your book. I don't know if you have any opinion on how can we find our why.
Well, great question. And it sort of reminds me of the question I got asked recently from someone else that said, well, how do I know what my purpose is? How do I discover what my purpose is? And for me, it's interesting because I tell them, well, to find your purpose, you don't focus on your purpose. And there's a reason I say that. It's because when we are actively trying to look for our purpose and say, well, I'm only going to do this once I know my purpose. The thing is, you're never really going to find it. You don't wake up one morning and go, Eureka, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And this is my purpose of why I was born. Unless you're watching a Hollywood film, this isn't really the real life scenario. What happens in reality is we go through a series of experiences that lead us to discovering what our purpose is. And so for me, it's about taking the focus away from what is my purpose or what is my why first, and just asking yourself, what am I most curious about right now? Right now, what am I most curious about? And it's a far easier question to answer. Whereas what is my purpose and why can be quite heavy because there's a lot of exploration work that has to be done. But simply asking yourself, what are you most curious about right now? And just to illustrate on how that helps me in my journey, when I was in corporate, what I was most curious about at that point was, could I actually move into the business world? So then I started reading about business and I started going to business seminars. And then I was curious about, at the time, my first business exposure was an MLM opportunity. So I got into MLM and quickly realized it wasn't for me. But again, some lessons were learned through that. And then my curiosity led me to the food business because I was passionate about food. And so I got involved in the food business, which kind of mirrored the Airbnb model, where you would go to somebody's home and you would try food, you would connect with locals. But again, I quickly learned that wasn't for me. But again, lessons were taken from that experience. And then after that, my curiosity led me to coaching. It was like, well, I've always enjoyed helping people. I wonder, could that be something that I could do full time? And that led me to wanting to learn more about coaching and then signing up to get a coaching qualification and certification. And then the curiosity was, well, can I make this an actual business? And so what happened over time is I very quickly discovered my purpose and my why, but it literally started with my curiosities. What was I curious about? And how could I explore my curiosities? because I believe that there is wisdom in our curiosities. There is a reason why you're curious about something. Now, it's the universe, or whatever you want to call it, whispering at you and saying, maybe you should try that. Just give that a go and see what you think. It may not work out, but who knows what can happen as a result. And so I think as we follow these breadcrumbs of clues, if you will, then eventually we arrive at that river of purpose.
I love it. And this brings me back to what you said earlier today. It's about like start where you are. Words to that effect.
Yeah.
So be grateful for what you have right now instead of like wishing that you'd be somewhere far away, and start with what you have. And then from there, basically the energy is going to start to flow, basically. And we have another question here. How can I get unstuck? I think this refers to maybe we don't have always good days, or maybe they're like really stuck somewhere in their career. But as a general thing, how can we get unstuck?
Sure. I think just like when your computer doesn't work, or it breaks down, or a device isn't working, what do? You unplug and restart it. And so I think in the same way, we all go through moments where we do feel stuck. And for some of us, it's because either we're lost, or we're going through a lot of thinking that we just need to get some clarity on. For me, there's two easy things you can do. The first is to just disconnect for a bit. Take some time to just go for a short break somewhere, go spend some time in nature. And second is start to write down what you're thinking. So all of those thoughts going on in your mind, just start to download them onto paper. Because as you download them onto paper, not only does your mind feel clearer and lighter, but what happens is that you can start to evaluate your thinking, become more familiar with what's going on in your mind. And from there, you can begin to establish what the next best step forward is. And that's all you need to know at the moment, is what is the next best step. Once you've taken that first next best step, then you decide what the next step is. And so writing all of this down is fantastic, because once you've got these thoughts onto paper, you can start to organize them in a way that gives you a feeling of clarity that you would not get if you just left it up in your mind.
Fantastic. I love that. I love a good writing session as well, especially when I'm stuck or lost. Tell me, Simon, I know that we're approaching quickly to the end of the hour, but one of my questions is, where do you get your motivation from? So obviously, like you're talking about curiosity. So like, I wonder what this would do. I wonder what this would do. And then before you know it, you're a world-renowned coach winning awards. So that's quite a big jump from like just the curiosity to get to the level that you are. What's behind this? Like, what drives you?
I think that lots of things drive me, Roxy. I think that one of the early influences, which I mentioned briefly at the beginning, is, was seeing my mum pass away and really teach me the fragility of life. And I don't think if I'm honest, I don't think many of us truly appreciate how fragile life is until we have lost someone, or we have personally experienced something like a near-death moment. And so those events really teach you the fragility of life. And for me, it matured me overnight. But not only that, it really gave me the fire underneath myself to realize that I had nothing to lose. We have nothing to lose. I mean, we don't know if we got another day given to us. Just in the same way my mum didn't know she had another day or not, and then it was taken away from her. And so for me, it's to realize that if you're going to think or act in any way, why not act and think in a bold way? Because we literally have nothing to lose. And the only regret many of us will have as we get to the end of our life is, I wish we started earlier. I wish I started earlier. And you very quickly realize that we don't have much time on this planet. We don't have much time. And I don't want to get to that point. There's a great quote that I have written in my diary, which I read daily because it's a powerful motivator. And that is the statement that the definition of hell is getting to the end of your life and the person you became meets the person you could have become.
Oof,
and
yes.
that for me is a very powerful motivator. So that's one of the drivers. The second is legacy for me, because I've learned through this journey that our value as a human is determined by how much more we've given to the world than we've taken from it. And that comes to legacy. So I've gone on this journey, Roxy, as I know many of us have gone on, from spending my attention on career virtues, which are the things such as how much money am I earning, what title do I have, what company do I work for, all the way towards legacy virtues, which are how do I want to be remembered, what stories will be left behind when I pass from this world, and how many people's lives will I touch through the work that I do, big or small. And that drives me. You know, the fact that I want to get to the end of my life smiling that I've done the best I could have done to have had a positive impact, or a ripple effect, if you will, on any individual or people that have come across my path in any way. And then the final thing that drives me is very personal, and it is my wife and my daughter. They are the things that drive me. And of course, my daughter only came into existence 2 years ago, but her presence drives me a lot, because for me, seeing their growth, seeing their evolution drives me to become a better human. And so even when people ask me, Simon, you know, how does it feel where you are at the moment? I honestly respond and I say, you know, I feel like I'm just getting started. And there's a reason why I say that, because if you truly are embracing the eternal student mindset, if you're truly learning something new every day, then of course you're always going to be feeling like you're only just getting started. Because, you know, for example, a couple of years ago, I started learning how to use YouTube. In the last 2 years, I learned how to write a book for the first time. This year, I had my first experience recording an audiobook. And now I'm looking into doing one of my book launches in the metaverse, which I have no idea about, but I'm going to learn how to do it. And then after this, I'm looking at, well, how do I do some more stuff in the media, like TV or with the streaming platforms? And again, that's going to be a completely new learning experience for me, which is going to make me feel like I'm just getting started. And so for me, that also energizes me, is knowing that there is so much to learn, so much out there that I'm yet to know. And that for me makes me want to wake up every day excited about what is possible.
That's fantastic. And for me, this is such a privilege to have witnessed your journey. I remember when I've seen you on that stage at JCI, you came with the same amount of energy, and you were talking with so much passion and so authentic. And you just didn't stop over the past few years, many years, right? And look where you got. So like for me, you're an example. Like if you don't stop, and if you believe, and if you put your best foot forward, like something is going to happen. And it was you that taught me that we have to think a bit more bolder, like bolder and bolder and bolder. So
definitely. And I think what you said there, just to echo what you said, Roxy, because I think it's great words what you shared. I think very important words is that if you are working towards something that is important to you, that means something, never ever give up. Never give up. Keep moving forward. Get back up, dust yourself off, and bounce back stronger. Because every day you keep going, there will be billions of other people around the world giving up and going home. Don't let that be you. Keep moving forward, because at the end of the day, if my journey shows anything, it's that we heavily underestimate what could be achieved in 5 years. We heavily underestimate that. 5 years ago, I was, people would never have heard of me 5 years ago. It's amazing what can happen in 5 years. So the message, to echo what Roxy just shared, is that consistency beats intensity. Be consistent with your habits, your actions, and your systems. And before you know it, you're going to be swimming in a land of opportunity, a world in which it feels almost dreamlike, that you have to pinch yourself and make sure you're not dreaming. Because just like myself in January, when I got those emails from Simon Sinek, Marie Forleo, Keith Ferrazzi, and all these incredible New York Times bestselling authors saying, Simon, we want to give you this blurb for your book, it felt to me like a dream. I mean, I felt like, is this real? Is this actually Simon writing back and writing that message? Can I just check it's not a spam account? And so I think you get to that moment of being in flow, and then you realize that is what life is about. life is about experiencing the entire spectrum of emotions that come with it, but also exposing yourself to the magic of the unknown.
Fantastic. I love this very much. As a final question for me, Simon, could you give like a few inspirational, I don't know how to say it, for our aspiring authors, so people that want to write a book or in the process of writing their book, but they're a bit afraid. Can you give them some sort of encouragement?
Sure. Well, it's going to lean a little bit onto some things I already said, but I'll make it even more specific because of the scenario you mentioned. The first is, if you're looking to write a book and to use it as a conduit to share your message with the world, the first thing you've got to do, especially if you've never written something before, is start making writing a habit. Start making writing a habit. Now, what I mean is that you don't have to write a chapter every day, but simply get into a habit of writing. It could be writing your thoughts down on paper each day. It could be writing a post on social media every day. It could be writing a newsletter every week. Start finding ways to make writing a habit. It's like speaking has been for me, because I've spoken so much over the years. Now speaking comes across a lot more natural. And so this is the same thing with writing. If you want to write in a way that helps you to communicate your thoughts, start making writing a habit. Second is something I've learned, is that you've got to start thinking long-term with your writing. So writing, in the grand scheme of the whole journey I've been on, is actually only one tiny piece of the puzzle. Writing just gets the book together. But then you've got to think about the marketing of the book, the endorsements of the book, the distribution of the book, who your market is of the book, and so on. And so what you want to start doing now is think, who would I love to have endorse my book? Who would be the sort of people that I would think, wow, it would be incredible to have this person endorse my book? And start thinking now of how you can build relationships with his or her team. How can you start building relationships that mean that you can draw on them when the time comes for those endorsements? And also, not just for endorsements, but for communities and groups and people who have newsletters that can spread your message and spread the word of your book when you come to publication, just as I will be in a few weeks' time. So that is a big piece of the puzzle, is how do you go about the business development side of the book, not just focusing on the book itself, because the book itself is just part one. You've got your product, but as any business owner knows, just having a good product isn't enough. You've got to learn how to market that product so that as many people as possible know about this great product. And the third thing is in reference to what I said earlier about environment. Start surrounding yourself with authors who are ahead of you, but also who are on the same journey as you. Now, the reason it is good to surround yourself with authors who are on the same journey as you is that you can hold each other accountable. You can say, for example, well, why don't we jump on a Zoom for 2 hours today or this weekend, and we turn our audio off, and for 2 hours we just have our video on and we just type and we write. And that way we hold each other accountable. So 3 quick thoughts for those in your audience looking to write a book, Roxy.
Fantastic, really, really good, and inspires me as well. Maybe I'm like, maybe I will get at some point. Like good things to consider.
Indeed.
Thank you so much, Simon, for tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic for you to share your thinking, your energy, and some of your life strategy, right? Like you also told us some of your stories. It has been an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Roxy, thank you so much for hosting me. And if any of your audience has any other questions, then feel free to reach out on Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm searchable by Simon Alexander Ong on those platforms, or on Instagram, the handle is @SimonAlexanderO.
Fantastic. And you are publishing, you're launching your book on the 21st of April. So if you want to order his book, it's going to be from getenergizedbook.com.
Yeah, so getenergizedbook.com, energize with a Z. And if you pre-order using that link and you drop your details in the form, then you will get an exciting early bonus coming next week, I believe. So yeah, so do keep your eyes peeled out for that. There will be some exciting things coming in the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you again. And I see lots of thank yous coming through the comments as well.
Thank you so much, and look forward to catching up with you soon, Roxy.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening.